Hi, I'm Bob Ethington.
And I'm Nick Nicholas.
And this is From Akron and Beyond. So the other week, I was looking at the New York Times, as I often do, in my study, wearing my robe and smoking my pipe. And there was a story there that I thought was kind of a little silly. It was about people now at concerts wanting to get more involved with the performer and somehow, become part of the show. And so they're increasingly throwing things on stage. And as is typically the case with the New York Times, it was kind of written with the sort of general, decline and fall of Western civilization theme that they like to run with, it seems. I always think that, if you really read the Times every single day, you'd probably have to go on suicide watch because all the news is so awful. But this particular story struck me as kind of silly because people have been throwing things on stage as long as I can remember in bands playing. There's always been somebody who's tried to jump up and take over or whatever. I mean, you could probably go back to the old Wild West where probably people shooting guns at people on stage.
In the 70s during our time, in England, everybody spit and
exactly
and threw quarters.
Yeah, right.
I remember who was it? I just was talking with us a couple of weeks ago, and somebody threw a quarter and it stuck in his guitar.
Oh, gee.
Yeah.
So that's my point, though, Nick, is that this kind of stuff has been happening forever. So, but what it did, what reading this article did, was it resulted in me thinking about some of the odd events of my music career where things have gone slightly awry or there's been some sort of minor disaster. And usually all in retrospect has been fun. Sometimes it shows that I was playing. Sometimes it shows that I went to. So I thought it would be kind of fun for both of us to kind of go back in time and recount some of these things. Nick, in all your years, I'm sure you've got some stories.
Oh, I've got some good ones, man. But no violence,
Well,
nothing,
okay.
Yeah, nothing to like that. You were in Cincinnati, but we played it. We played the Cincinnati Punk Rock Festival with a band back in, I think, 77, but nothing happened.
Well, so you want to share one of your stories with us?
Yeah.
Get us started.
Yeah, I'm going to end it with one of the best rock and roll moments of my life, and I'm 72 years old, but here's just a couple small ones. I remember in 1972, a few of us went to see King Crimson at the Allen Theater, and mismatch acts. Black Oak, Arkansas opened. And after
that was a very typical thing back then, the mismatched bills.
They probably had the same management.
Right.
But Black Oak, after the third or fourth encore that Black Arkansas did, the crowd was actually booing. And it was just, very uncomfortable. And finally someone came out to announce that King Crimson had canceled. And they weren't coming, that something to do with their airplane problems. And so Black Oak, Arkansas was sort of, left hanging there. Hey, just go on. They might be here,
Oh, no. Sounds awful. I'm imagining a long drum solo as part of that show.
Oh, long everything, But, the worst mismatch was I went to see Eric Burdon and the Animals. That was during their, Sky Pilot. They had a hit, at the Akron Civic Theater. And it was in the late 60s. And of all people, they had a comedian open for him. I mean, the guy was giving the crowd the finger by the end, because they were just booing the poor guy after 10 minutes.
Every now and then a comedian ends up on a rock show opening act lineup, and that never seems to go well, from what I understand.
Terry in our band was a ventriloquist for a while, and he opened for a couple people at the Live Spider, and he was booed and bottles thrown at him, and people knew him.
Well, speaking of mismatched shows, this wasn't theoretically that bad of a mismatch, but it sure turned out to be. One of the first concerts I went to was at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. It was the Jay Giles Band, and opening for them was the band Focus. Now, you may remember Focus. They were a Danish sort of prog rock band that had one hit song, Hocus Pocus, that involved, you may recall, yodeling as part of the song. So anyway, that was their hit. That's what everyone wanted to hear. But other than that, they were very proggy, long songs, what have you. And the place is packed, and everyone is there. It's in a gym, and so all the chairs are just folding chairs on the floor. And Focus comes out, and they're playing and playing and playing. Who knows? Maybe it was one of these stories like you were just talking about where Jay Giles was running late or something. But they were playing way too long, and at one point, the bass player, it's one of these things where everyone's doing a solo, and the bass, and of course they have a flute player, so there's already a flute solo, and then the bass player's playing, and so it's no one else is playing, it's just this bass, and you just hear this like do 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 do, and someone in the audience yells, Jay F. Giles! And the whole place starts screaming and pick up the chairs and start throwing them at the stage. And so Focus got mad and they didn't play Hocus Pocus. That was like they showed us. But then Jay Giles came out, and they were great. That was at the height of their powers, like that Full House album that was out and stuff. So, love them or hate them in terms of their music, they definitely put on a good show. But
yeah, you just reminded me of something that I forgot about till just then. I took my daughter and two of her friends when they were in high school. They were probably 15 or 16 to see Green Day at Blossom, and it started raining a little bit, but not hard. But everybody, it was like a mass of, they were gathering up grass, making piles of grass, throwing it in the air, and piles of blankets were set on fire. And then everything was like raining down on us, and
well, that might be the show that resulted in them banning any blankets and stuff from Blossom.
There I am, probably in my 50s, have gone to all these, from Iggy Pop to Blondie, Diva, all these concerts, and I've never seen anything like that.
Right. Somehow I have the feeling you instigated it, Nick.
Yeah.
I don't know. A story that comes to mind from my actual playing experience, you mentioned Cincinnati. When I was in the band Unit 5, we had a chance to play down in Cincinnati at Bogart's, and
we played there.
Yeah, and at the time, it was going to be really exciting because there was a local radio station, FM station, that actually played those shows live on their airwaves, and so this was like going to be this great opportunity, for exposure or whatever. So we drive down there, and we get there, and it's like. Nick knows these stories about Unit 5. It's taken forever to get the sound running and the guitars in tune and what have you. And we're running late. So basically, like, the show comes on the radio live on the station, and what you're hearing for the first 8 or 9 minutes are guitars tuning because we're not ready to play. And then we start to play, and 30 seconds into the first song, I realize that there's no rug or anything on the stage, and so my drums are completely moving all over the place. And so our guy who was our roadie, Eric Cunningham,
good guy.
I had to have him come up and sit in front of my kick drum for the entire set on the stage, and things were still moving, and so it was like I begin a song, and then by the end of the song, all of my arms and legs are like akimbo, and then I'd have to pull everything back together. It was a real disaster. I was so mad. The poor Eric had to sit there with my kick drum banging into his head, as he's sitting there in front of us.
That reminds me of something similar. We '77 or '78, we played a gig with the Human Switchboard at a small bar in Cleveland called the Governor's Chateau. It was on Governor Street. Mm-hmm. And we're setting up our equipment the way you were, and this kid comes in and he said, "Hey man, I have a light show. Would it be okay if I ran a light show with you guys?" Oh, here we are. We never had a light show in our lives, Yeah, sure. So when the time came for the show, this kid comes in with these 2 big cans with a light bulb in it. And we, okay. And then we started playing, and he just kneeled. It was a tiny stage, about, you wouldn't believe how small it was. He was 2 feet away from us, kneeling down, and he would just shine one light, shine the other one, blink it. That was our light show.
Pretty high tech.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so in terms of tuning, I do have another story with Unit 5 that has a similar beginning to it. But this is years later. This is after we were no longer really a working band or anything, but I believe this is around 2005, 6, somewhere in that vicinity.
Old enough to know better.
Yeah, right. Oh, definitely. Well, Phil Hoffman had made those documentaries on the local Akron bands, Akron Sound. And the second one was called If You're Not Dead, Play. And so I was at the library at the time, and we arranged it that the premiere of the film would be at the main library in our auditorium. And the auditorium at the main library in Akron is beautiful. It's a great place. Yeah. But there had never been a live rock kind of band play there before. And so, they'd had some concerts, but it was always just featuring a piano or string group, quartet or whatever. So anyway, we gathered together to do this show, and it's going to be us and the Chai Pig was going to play. And we were going to play first, and then Chai Pig would play. So I'm not going to use any names in this, but one of the guys in the band got there. We got there very, very early. I mean, this thing was supposed to start at 7 or 7:30 in the evening, and he was there about 10:30 in the morning. And bringing in equipment, and I'm having to work. So I'm at work, but then I'm coming in and looking in at what's happening, and it took all day. I mean, it took all day to set up our band on the stage, and the sound. There was all these problems with the sound, and all of that wasn't really our fault or his fault, because, like I said, this was new territory. The people that ran the auditorium weren't really totally familiar with how to, properly mic a band like this, whatever. But to come down, the ultimate point of this whole thing is we go through this whole thing, 8 hours. It's an 8-hour sound check. Oh. And we finally are there. The place is full. They show the movie. People are really enjoyed it. The documentary, I should say. And then we get up there, and it's like, yay, Unit 5, haven't played for years. Here they are. We're going to play, and so we had 3 songs. It was we're going to do 3 songs. Chai Pig was going to do 3. So we get up there, and we start getting ready to play, and the guitar is inaudible. There's no guitar. The amp is dead. Now remember, this is after 8 hours of trying to get the sound right. So now our guitar player is having to borrow somebody else's amp from Chai Pig. So then it's okay, let's go. And so we start. And the whole first song, you can't hear. Tracy Thomas was our singer. You can't hear her vocals at all.
8 hours.
They're dead, no vocal. And so, of course, and I can't really tell because we're playing, and I'm the monitors must not be working or something. And I'm noticing this look of consternation on the face of these 400 people that are in the audience. And it was only later that I learned that, no one could hear Tracy until halfway through the second song. So I was so mad. And then, of course, the thing that's a hot one is then Chai Pig comes out, everything's fine. Vocals are fine, and, guitars can be heard, everything's fine. Oh, that was annoying. That was an annoying day. I remember going to, a girl I was dating at the time
went to see the Rolling Stones at the Rubber Bowl in 1972.
Famous show.
Yeah, we thought we'd get there, early. And we got there like 4 hours early. And there were a lot of other people there, and we had a cooler with water in it. And, man, it was hotter than, you could imagine there. And I think it was, it was in the middle of summer. And we had these seats. We sat on the grass right in front of the stage. So we were probably, 20 feet away from, okay, so we waited through this. The concert started. Everybody stood up in front of us, couldn't see a thing.
Oh, no.
Nothing, not one thing. So we wound up going all the way to the worst seats in the stands, to see Stevie Wonder open and stuff. It was a great concert, but,
Yeah.
And then also, a friend of mine in 1987 went to see Pink Floyd at Cleveland Stadium. And we had dinner at the New York Spaghetti House. It was downtown, and we walked to the stadium. And it was a great show. And when we left, our car was stolen.
Oh.
So, that was a nice Cleveland greeting,
I'm Bob Ethington with my co-host Nick Nicholas. This is From Akron and Beyond, and we're just recounting some of the more memorable, or maybe more to the point, things that we wish we could forget in terms of shows we've attended or shows we've played over the years. You kind of were reminding me, you use the word hot with this Rubber Bowl thing, and that's probably a common theme for anyone that goes to outdoor shows, is heat, surviving the heat. I'd forgotten about going to this was 1975, I think. Nelson Ledges, Todd Rundgren.
Oh, you went to that?
Yeah, with Pure Prairie League and Hello People and Buzzy Linhart.
I love the Hello People.
Yeah. And, but anyone who's ever been to Nelson Ledges knows that there's not a single tree or bit of shade anywhere.
Really?
And the place was totally packed, and it was 90 some degrees and not a cloud in the sky. And it was just, you kind of just felt like you were like a human version of bacon. I mean, it was just, it was so hot, and everyone got sunburned. It was a grueling day. But coming out on the other side of that, playing a show, this is probably about 7 or 8 years ago. There was a Highland Square Festival here in Akron, not to be confused with Porch Rocker.
Oh, it's different.
Yeah, and but they had some bands, and one of the bands they wanted was the band Half Cleveland, which I played in with Harvey Gold and Chris Butler and a bunch of other guys, a lot of Tin Huey alumni in that band. But anyway, where they had us set up was in the parking lot by the Highland Square Library. And so you're on asphalt, and then they put this metal stage on there, and there was no canopy or anything. So it was just the sun beating down. Again, just one of the hottest days of the year. And I think I was almost dehydrated from that show. I was playing, and because we had fun, and, it was like there's pictures of us, and it's like we're really having a great time. But then after I was just like, I could barely, I was parched. And I remember going over to the matinee. I'm going to drop a name here, but I went over to the matinee, and Patrick Carney was in town, and he'd come to see the show, and he comes up, and he's like, "Hey Bob, man, that was good, a good show. Can I get you a beer?" And I'm like, I couldn't talk. I was just like, and I was miming water. I just wanted water. Yeah. And he got this, like, I guess they just thought everyone at the table wanted water. So they brought this big, pitcher with ice in it. And I think I drank like the whole thing. I just picked it up.
No glass or anything.
No. It was a matter of survival.
Do you remember any like impromptu kind of things at shows that turned out to be pretty cool?
Sure.
Like, I just thought of when we used to play the Pirates Cove on Thursdays with Perubu in Cleveland. And back then we just did one cover song. I think we still do it, Pablo Picasso by Jonathan Richman. Mm-hmm. And Peter Lochner was there. His band had, I think it was Peter and the Wolves that played before, was there. And, he was one of the founders of Perubu and, legendary. He was a great rock writer, and he was just he died too young. Anyway, he was there in the audience, and halfway through the opening chords of Pablo Picasso, he recognized he came up on stage, and we sang it together.
Oh, nice.
And that was a great memory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That would be cool. That'd be a very cool memory.
I actually have two epic stories. But the first one I didn't tell you about, but I think not March of 1977, there was a real important show that happened at the Agora in Cleveland. It was Iggy Pop. And a lot of what happened with the Akron sound, sort of developed that night.
Is this the famous show where David Bowie played keyboards with him?
Yeah, we're just sitting there, there was Devo was there, members of the Rubber City Rebels, a few Bizarros, just everybody from Akron wanted to see Iggy Pop.
Sure.
So we were all there. Blondie opened, by the way. So we're just sitting there. We're sitting there talking, a few of us, and so big, had to be a bouncer. He was like a huge guy with probably 300, 350 pounds, just starts, walking towards us. We're moving out of the way. And there's a guy behind him with a red afro wig, sunglasses, and a cape. And, he's okay, fine, and we just sort of glance as these guys approach the stage, and they get up on the stage, and guy takes his wig off, his sunglasses, his cape. It's David Bowie.
Oh, okay.
And he was he played keyboards backing Iggy Pop the whole show. It was, unexpected and really cool. He was great. He would sing some vocal parts, background. And that night, we're just... That
would have been when they were working together, right? Like on The Idiot,
that was a promotion, promoting that album.
Okay.
Promoting that album. Yeah. And Blondie just had her first album. In fact, her original bass player was still with her, the guy that was real animated on stage. I can't think of his name now. He wrote a couple songs on her first album. Mm-hmm. But anyway, what made this famous, besides all of us guys in bands that wanted to be famous, we were there. But Devo somehow either slipped a tape to David Bowie or someone in his entourage, and that's how it all started. That tape got in the hands of Brian Eno, and the rest is history. But that was a very... And there's... I don't know if it was an official bootleg or just a bootleg. It's called Iggy and Ziggy, that captured that show perfectly.
Yeah, there was a actual live album from that show that came out on RCA. I think it was called TVI.
I have that. I have the unofficial one.
Yeah, but it was terrible sounding. I mean, it was almost ridiculous that that was a commercial recording that they put out.
The bootleg was good.
Yeah, the bootleg's right could be better. Maybe why that exists. I don't know. That is a good. That is a legendary show. Yeah. Probably one of the most famous concerts in this area. And of course, Bowie was working with Eno at that time as well, so that all makes sense that it would have gone from, him to Eno, and they were all working with Iggy, and then of course Eno would produce the first Devo album. So yeah, Nick, I think just everyone even listening to you on the radio, much less those people who know you personally, all view you as something of a tough guy and a fighter. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, just don't get too close.
Don't mess with Nick. Well, the reason I bring this up is I do have a couple of stories that involve fights at shows. One of them is with my band playing, and another one is going to see a band play. I may have told this story before at one point on the show, but I'll tell it again. I was Unify was playing at JB's, and it was a New Year's show, and this was this was downstairs, and pretty sure upstairs the Numbers Band were playing. But as has been mentioned before, when we had our episode about local venues, JB's tended to attract two different pretty disparate crowds. And so when we were playing, Unit 5 was playing in the basement, it was all these sort of punk / new wave kids. And then upstairs, it was more kind of a biker kind of audience. So we're playing, and a good friend of mine who had been in the Peace Corps and had just gotten back from several years in Africa, in Zaire, a.k.a. the Congo, he was in town to visit me, and he wanted to come see our band play. So he's there with me, and we're up on stage and we're playing, and there must have been a breakup with the guys playing upstairs, because all of a sudden this already very crowded downstairs basement at JB's gets even more crowded as all these bikers come in, and it's getting real full and real, they're all pretty aggressive. And this one guy comes up, and again, our singer was Tracy Thomas, and she was up front singing, and this one guy comes up and starts fondling her ankle. And so she was wearing these sort of like stiletto heels, and she ends up popping him right in the head with these, kicks him in the head. Oh. And so now we have a whole, Dodge City Western brawl breaking out with all these people fighting and everything.
JB's up?
No, downstairs. Oh. Yeah. And so I'm like, I'm not getting involved in any of this. So I've gone off to the side of the stage, and I mean, seriously, bottles were being thrown. I mean, it was like I tipped over a table and I was hiding behind the table. And this friend of mine who had just gotten back from Africa is like kneeling down next to me, and he looks at me and he says, "Are all your shows like this?"
God.
Thankfully, no. But that one was, yes. I'll never forget that. And then years later, at the late lamented Lime Spider, which of course is now the delicious Lockview, wonderful bar downtown. But of course, before that, many years before that, it had been Bilbo's. We'll all remember, with its Hobbit imagery inside.
One time it was a Greek restaurant too. They had belly dancer on the roof.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I forget what that was called.
Huh. So you had to go up on the roof to see her?
Yeah, in the summer.
It was worth it, though. But anyway, but it was Lime Spider for a number of years, and of course he had a lot of really terrific shows there, which we've talked about. But one of my very favorite bands is Guided by Voices, and they played at the Lime Spider.
God, I missed that show.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say this is around 2003, 2004, somewhere in that vicinity. So they're playing, and exactly what happened, I'm not 100% sure, but there was somebody on the side of the stage started like heckling them, and then like apparently like trying to grab the guy's guitar or something. And so they just stopped playing in the middle of a song and like all go down and beat the crap out of this guy.
The band?
Yes. And then they go back up. It was very odd and strange. And then they get back up and they say, sorry about that. And then they start playing again. And, so anyway, there was a woman that wrote for the Scene magazine, and it turned out that this guy who had gotten into it with Bob Pollard and company was a friend of hers. And so she was like really mad at the band for doing this. So she wrote this pan review in the Scene that was real snarky, and since then they've never played Akron again, and they've said they never play Akron again because of that review. So, which kind of annoys me, because I don't think it was really, Chris, granted, I guess I'm on their side, but it struck me that he started it. Luckily, I never got involved in any actual fisticuffs myself, I'm happy to say.
Well, all the probably thousands of shows I've gone to in my life, I've never been at one where there was not even a punch thrown.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, that's got to be a record of something somehow, I had to talk about this event, because back then when, let's say you're in your 50s and you see probably one of the best rock and roll experiences, that you could ever have. And it happened at what's still going on around here called the High School Rock-Off. You guys familiar with that?
No.
Well, yeah, you know something about that, right, Brad?
That's a big annual wintertime event for like high school bands.
Yeah,
it's kind of what launched Detention a few years ago, right before the pandemic.
That was where they played.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if they still do, but back then the winner, besides a little bit of money, they got like free studio time, so they could actually do a professional recording, And at the time, my good friends of mine would. Now it's my wife, Jennifer. Her daughter had a band called Imperfect, so I'd go to the rock-offs, and this was in 2003 or 2004 at the Odeon down in the Flats, and it started out that the band Imperfect was 4 girls, but then there was a drummer change and they added a young man, so. They even opened with Bizarros for the Bizarros once at the Lime Spider. They were a very, entertaining young band. They're all like 15, 16. So I went to, it was one of the final shows of the Rock Off, and I saw one of the worst bands I'd ever seen. This kid got up on stage completely naked, and he was covering himself up with his guitar. And then, there was like, the music was just I don't know, prop for him to show off. But then
show what off?
Yeah. But then this is like a enlightening rock and roll moment. This nerdy looking kid gets up there, his glasses and his messed up hair, and must have been 14. And he starts to tell a story about his band and how they were so looking forward to doing the show. And but something happened. He said, my band broke up, but I'm here, and I'm going to play for you. So he put a cassette on, and he starts playing along, his guitar playing along with this, this cassette in the background. It's loud, but it's actually entertaining because he's got his whole heart's in it. After about 10, 15 minutes of this, he says a couple words, and he puts his guitar down, and all this feedback's coming back. The tape's still playing, but his guitar's feeding back, and goes to the back of the stage, and this is pre-planned. He had a big banner that he unfurled, and we're all sitting there, in the audience, and it says, F you, Clear Channel. And he just walks off of this wall of sound, and the parents are there with their kids, watching their kids perform. And it was just a great rock and roll moment.
This was a high school act?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, the kid did it solo, but he had the heart and the nerve to pull it off. And, he's probably, a stockbroker or a banker by now, because that was like, what, 10, 12, well, it was in 2003.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
10 years
20 years ago.
20 years
ago.
Oh,
my gosh.
Yeah.
You're listening to From Akron and Beyond with Bob Ethington and Nick Nicholas on the Summit FM. 91.3 WAPS Akron Canton, WAPS HD1 Akron, and 90.7 FM WKTL Struthers Youngstown. Also heard in Athens, Ohio on 90.1 FM, W211BT Athens. You're listening to From Akron and Beyond.
Well, you just made me flash back on a story that I had not actually put on my list, I'm sure, because I had tried to bury it in the vaults of my memory. But speaking of high school experiences of playing music, there was a battle of the bands. I lived in Livonia, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit at the time, and this was the first rock band I was in. Our name was Redneck. I remember thinking that was a really cool name. In retrospect, it was a bad choice. But we played, we had 2 or 3 original songs, but most of our songs were covers. And coming from that Detroit area, we did a lot of pretty cool covers. We did, MC5 and Stooges songs, Stones, I don't know, Beatles. I mean, it was all, and we were not very good, but we were, for a long time, a trio with no bass player. Take that, Black Keys. We had 2 guitars and drums and no bass, which is even more unwieldy. But then we did finally add a bass player. And so we thought we were pretty good. We played like a number of times, like at, 8th grade, I don't know what you'd call them, nights out, sock hops, whatever they called them. But so there was a big battle of bands at this like very large high school. And we knew we were going to win because there was a band there called Nature's Way, and they had
Vitamin Company.
And they had a whole. Well, I think it was from the Spirit song. Remember that? But anyway, they had like a light show and everything, and they were older, and we knew they were going to win. But we were like, we thought maybe we'd come in third. I mean, that would be cool if we could. And so we get there. And again, this is one of these things, I won't name any names, although these are ancient stories going way, way back, and it's not even in this area. But we get there, and the guy who was the leader of the band, our singer and lead guitar player, and at this time, I'm like in 9th grade, just so okay. So, and nerd. So, yeah. And so, maybe 10th grade, but that was as old as I was. So we get there and our guitar player shows up and it's immediately evident that he is impaired. How exactly, I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that pharmaceuticals of some sort were involved. And so each band is supposed to play 3 songs. And so we were going to play Jumpin' Jack Flash, Ramblin' Gamblin' Man, the Bob Seger song. And then our big number was going to be I'm Your Captain, the Grand Funk Railroad song. And so we, which of course has the epic chorus, I'm getting closer to my home. All right. Ring a bell, just some of you out there. So we get up and we play, and we're really sloppy. And because this guy can't really play, he's not in his right head. He was a pretty good guitarist and okay singer, but he did not bring his A game that night. Let's put it that way. So it's now time for our big epic finish. And I'm like, okay, well, this is going to save us because we do a killer version of this. And we start playing. He starts singing, and he's up at the mic, and he starts going, I'm your captain. I'm your captain. I'm your captain. I'm your captain. He doesn't know the lyrics. He's just completely saying the same line over and over. That means that we have no idea when the changes are coming or anything. And so it just turned into this absolute debacle. It was terrible. I think it just kind of ground to a halt after about 6 minutes of I don't think we ever got to be closer to home.
You never made it.
No, not even, couldn't even see it from the boat way out there. And
that was it. You didn't win.
Yeah, and it was no, we did not win. I don't think we even placed. Yeah.
I remember.
That was so mortifying. That was our last show. I remember that was it. I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, when I was telling that story earlier about the Governor's Chateau where that kid showed up with a light show, I also forgot that same night that the girl who had arranged the show, her name was Maureen, came up and said, hey, Nick, it's not cool for your drummer to be out there mooning cars. Yeah, I mean, Rick was out there, mooning cars. I mean, he had too much to drink, and this is before we started. I'm thinking, what the heck's going to happen by the end of the night? So I had a talk with him, and he's okay.
Well, I'm Bob Ethington. I'm with my co-host Nick Nicholas. This is From Akron and Beyond. We're having a little too much fun in this episode, just recounting our various war stories of shows we've attended and or played at, and things that maybe went not quite how they were hoped to go or expected to go. A show that comes to my mind with, again, it's another Unit 5 story. So this is going back to probably 1980, somewhere in that vicinity. We went up to Pirates Cove to open for a band called Flipper. Now, Flipper was a very hardcore punk band. Yeah, right. And
California?
Yes, I think they were an LA band, I believe. But we get there, and speaking of people being impaired, basically the whole band was. And so we open, we're playing. Of course, we probably weren't the best. We weren't as mismatched as some of these bills we've been talking about, but we probably weren't the perfect opening band for these guys. But it went over okay. And so then they come out to play, and it was absolutely, the drummer didn't even come out. So they just had somebody from the audience come up, and this guy did not know how to play drums at all. So he's just like, it was, in one respect, I guess it was kind of like the ultimate punk rock show, because it was absolute anarchy. But on the other hand, the music was what absolute anarchy sounds like.
Where was this at?
Pirates Cove. Oh. Yeah. And it was, I don't know. It was awful.
I remember we did a tour with a young band from Detroit. Played like Columbus, Akron, and Cleveland. They were called Little Claw. They were a really great little band. They're fans of the Bizarros. They were like in their early 20s, and we're old guys. And we played Columbus once, and the jukebox even had Captain Beefheart on it.
Wow!
Which is amazing,
Yeah.
And a Latino hardcore band opened for us. I wish I could remember their name, but they were dragging their guitars around by the cord and punching holes in the ceiling. It was a fun show. Yeah,
well, I want to make it clear. I'm all for riotous rock and roll shows and noise and the whole thing. It was more just the fact that these guys, they basically didn't even play. They just turned their instruments all the way up and just were like banging out. They were, I don't know what the problem was, but
it's different.
Yeah. I wonder if you've ever had like a show that you were really looking forward to and things didn't go at all the way that you were hoping. I have an example of this, Nick. No. This goes back when I was playing with the Tin Huey guys, and we were going to open at Maxwell's in New Jersey, in Hoboken, New Jersey.
I heard about this.
Very famous club. Yeah. Springsteen had played there. All kinds of great shows had happened at that club. Sadly, out of business. The pandemic, I think, closed them down permanently. But we were going to open for Robin Hitchcock.
Yeah, one of my favorites, man.
Yeah, and I was really excited about it, and we all were. And so it was late October, and we drive to New York City, and it starts snowing that afternoon. This is like, it's before Halloween. It's like the 24th, 25th of October. And it starts snowing, and then it keeps snowing. And then I was like staying with a friend of mine there who had an apartment in Hoboken, which is where Maxwell's was. And the next morning, I'm like, the sun hasn't even risen yet. And I hear this friend of mine saying like, well, you're not going to be playing any show tonight. Mm-hmm. And I look out, and it's an absolute blizzard. Apparently, it was the most snowfall New York had ever gotten in the month of October. And so we're just completely snowed in. Robin Hitchcock cancels. He can't get there. And so we'd practiced and practiced, and had this great set down, and we'd, driven and hauled all our equipment, and it was all, all this excitement for this show, and now it's not going to happen. So anyway, so I hear that, well, there is this bar that's going to be open the next night, and there's a lot of local bands that play there and stuff, and they've asked us to play there. And so at least it's not a complete loss theoretically. So we get there and, again, set everything up and getting ready to play. And I sit down and we play like one or two songs. And then it turns out that this was like a night, like it was kind of like jam night. Anybody can sit in. And so, like, some dude comes up with, with his drumsticks, and it's like, it's time for me to leave. and I was so mad. And I remember I'm sitting there, and I'm realizing there's like 4 other guys that are going to be getting out to play drums and stuff. And I'm like, so I just like went to another side. There was a bar in another room, and I was there. And then I remember later, like, Harvey Gold and Chris Butler were like, Bob, where'd you go? And I'm like, I was just like,
that's great.
I was so irritated.
All the way to New Jersey for a jam night.
Yeah. 2 songs. So I am Bob Ethington, and I'm here with my co-host, Nick Nicholas. This is From Akron and Beyond. And we've been having some fun in this episode, just recounting sort of fun shows and horror stories from various concerts we either played at or attended, which brings me to my final anecdote for this show, which goes back to 2003 and at the Grog Shop in Cleveland. And a lot of you may remember a performer. He's still around. His given name is Damon Michael Goff. But he went by the name Badly Drawn Boy. Oh. And Badly Drawn Boy had a period there where he was really getting huge. I mean, he won the Mercury Prize in Britain, which is very prestigious award. And he did the soundtrack for the Hugh Grant movie About a Boy, which is a fun movie, and the music was really good in that. All his music was really good on his first 3 albums. And so he was playing the Grog Shop, and I was very excited to go, and a few of my friends went, and there were a big house there. This was the old Grog Shop, not the current one, but the one that was there before. And so he comes out on stage with an acoustic guitar, and he starts singing his songs. And he's kind of quiet, and people back at the bar are not really paying attention. They're talking, gabbing away. You hear glasses tinking together and beer bottles, what have you. And so he stops playing, and he starts yelling at us. Oh. And no, it doesn't say like, could you please be quiet? I'm trying to play my music or whatever. No, he's like very irate. So that does not work in his favor, because he now picks up again and he's playing some more, and it's had no effect on the audience. And I mean, I get it. I went to see him. I wasn't thrilled about the noise in the back either, but he really didn't quite handle it right, I don't think. So he stops again, and at this point, he says the memorable line, I'll never forget this. He says, if John Lennon were here, you'd shut up and listen. Well, I'm the new John Lennon. And so, and I'm like, that's not a good way to play this at all. That's bad. Yeah. So now it's even worse. And he's playing, and the audience is now just even getting even rowdier. And so he finally stops again, puts his guitar down, leaves the stage, goes back to the bar. And the next thing you hear is all of these smashing glasses and bottles. No. Yeah. He apparently just went and like cleared off everything that smashed.
Oh my God!
And then he walks. He leaves. He goes off. Off like doesn't go back on stage. He leaves, and everyone's just kind of sitting like they're like, well, he's played like 20 minutes, and that was it. And it's just and of course. the club, I'm sure they have, it's in the contract. You have to play a certain amount of time to get paid. So they're like, obviously have told him, well, we're not paying you if you don't go back out and, play an hour or whatever it was. So he comes back out, and one more time makes things worse. Now he's apologizing, but then he says, I'm just really sorry, but I've been on the road for a long time, and I'm really missing my wee little child. And I was talking the other day with Bruce Springsteen, and we were both talking about how hard it can be on the road and missing your family. And I'm like, okay, once again, you're dropping the name, badly drawn by hanging out with the boss and commiserating about, life on the road. So he played, but at this point, the thing that was funny was no one even cared. I mean, it wasn't even a matter of people making noise it was just kind of like, some guy's playing up there on the stage, whatever. Half the audience left, But anyone who was there remembers this show vividly because it was so it was one of those things that just made you cringe being there. It was just embarrassing for everybody.
I remember probably it was either 1969 or very early 70s at Smiling Dog Saloon seeing Leonard Cohen. And all the bands back then would do two shows. They'd do probably one at 8 and then one at, a couple hours later. And there were decent amount of people there, but it wasn't packed. And he was trying to, between songs, try to talk us out of staying for the second set. I think he wanted to go home early. He goes, I'm just going to do the same songs again.
There's really no point in staying.
Yeah. It was a great show. I mean, it was wonderful, but anyway.
Well, that's how Leonard is, though, or was. He was a, mercurial fellow. But, well, this has been a lot of fun, I think. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to it. I'm sure you all have your own versions of these kinds of stories. We all do. All its music lovers have had the occasional show that you go to, and you end up afterwards thinking, like, man, why did I go to this?
I hope we all keep having those kind of moments.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm Bob Ethington. I've been with my co-host, Nick Nicholas. This has been From Akron and Beyond, and we'll see you next time.